Hare Paramahansa Paribhajagacharya Stotara Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ramacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Jagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Shri Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai. Shri Navadvip Dhama Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Shama Veda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaivam narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraят nastapareshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shlokir bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. So reading from the second canto, 7th chapter, text number 22. Dhanvantaris cha Bhagavan Swayam Eva Kirtur Namna Ninam Prurujam Rujav Ashu Anti Yagye Cha Bhagam Amritayor Avavarunda Ayushya Vedam Anusatyastya Anushastya Vitarya Avitirya Loke. Repeat the words. Davantarahi, the incarnation of God named Davantari. Cha, and Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Svayameva, personally himself. Kirtihi, fame personified. Namna, by the name. Ninam, Nridnam Puruhanti, Ninam Puruhanti, cures. Yagye, in. Yagye, in the. Yagye, in the sacrifice. Cha, also. Bhagavan, share. Amrita, nectar. Ayuhu, duration of life. Ava, from. Avarunde, obtains. Ayushya, of duration of life. Vedam, knowledge. Anushati, Anushasti, directs. Avatirya, incarnating. Loke, in the universe. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord, in his incarnation of Dhanvantari, very quickly cures the diseases of the ever-diseased living entities simply by his fame personified, and only because of him do the demigods achieve long lives. Thus, the personality of Godhead becomes ever glorified. He also exacted a share from the sacrifices, and it is he only who inaugurated the medical science or the knowledge of medicine in the universe. Responsively, the Lord, in his incarnation of Dhanvantari, very quickly cures the diseases of the ever-diseased living entities simply by his fame personified. And only because of him do the demigods achieve long lives. Thus the personality of Godhead becomes ever glorified. He also exacted a share from the sacrifices. And it is he only who inaugurated the medical science or the knowledge of medicine in the universe. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, everything emanates from the ultimate source of the personality of Godhead. It is therefore understood in this verse that medical science, or knowledge in medicine, was also inaugurated by the personality of Godhead in his incarnation, Dhanvantari. And thus the knowledge is recorded in the Vedas. The Vedas are the source of all knowledge, and thus knowledge in medical science is also there for the perfect cure of the diseases of the living entity. The embodied living entity is diseased by the very construction of his body. The body is the symbol of diseases. The disease may differ from one variety to another, but disease must be there, just as there is birth and death for everyone. So by the grace of the personality of Godhead, not only are diseases of the body and mind cured, but also the soul is relieved of the constant repetition of birth and death. The name of the Lord is also called Baba No Shadi, or the source of curing the disease of material existence. Now the verse again, the Lord in his incarnation of Dhanvantari very quickly cures the diseases of the ever-diseased living entities simply by his fame personified, and only because of him do the demigods achieve long lives. Thus the personality of Godhead becomes ever glorified. He also exacted a share from the sacrifices, and it is he only who inaugurated the medical science or the knowledge of medicine in the universe. Mukam karoti vachalam bangam longayate girim yatkri patarham bande Shri Guru Dinatarane. So today being the first day of Kartik, I'm going to talk a little about Kartik, not so much on this verse, but because we are mandated to read Srimad Bhagavatam every day, I read the verse and the purport. What little I know about Kartik is that it's a special season. I'm drawing on what I've read from Prabhupada's books, is the October-November on the lunar calendar period, which is considered very auspicious. Actually, in other parts of the world, especially in India, and especially in Vrindavan, the mood is among Vaishnavas is very important, and it's considered that in the Vrindavan time, whatever you do is good or bad is magnified thousands of times. I don't know, those are Prabhupada's words. I know it sounds pretty extravagant, but those are the words he used, magnified thousands of times. So if you do a good deed, it's magnified thousands of times. And if you do something evil or offensive, it's magnified 1,000 times. Vaishnavas particularly imbibe from what I know, the Vrindavan mood, which is the mood of thinking of Krishna as their friend, their lover, their father, their son, like that, instead of thinking that Krishna is God or in the Aishvarya or very advanced stage. This lecture is kind of very simple and introductory, and you've probably heard many of these things before, but because there are some new faces in this room and there are many new faces out there in viewing land and cyber world, I'm going to repeat a lot of stuff and keep it a little on the simple side. So that's the Vrindavan and Vaishnava mood. It's personalism as opposed to impersonalism. We think of Krishna as our son, our friend, our lover, our husband, our wife, our guide, our master, and all things. So in a way, it's a very intimate kind of relationship. It takes away from the formality of thinking of Krishna as God. It's a time of very spiritual and religious time in India, when I was there, when Kartik started, it's also the time of the year when the seasons change from, Vrindavan is very extreme. It's very hot in the summer, very cold in the winter. So the Kartik season, according to the lunar calendar, is the change from hot to cold. And very often you hear a lot of, I heard it myself, a lot of coughing and wheezing because it's the start of the cold season. And people generally get very, not very ill, but they get ill. At least they get colds for a day or so. So whatever evils you do or offenses you commit or anything in the Vrindavan period are considered to be excused because it's a very special time. Just as in the West we think of the birth of Christ or something like that as very special. There's a lot of holidays, the banks are closed, people don't go to work. So in Vrindavan it's a very special season. Kartik is like that, and it lasts for 30 days. And on, I think it's the 5th of November, I think that's the date, we're going to be celebrating Govardhana Puja here, and it's very special because, is that right? 6th. Anyway, whatever day, the 5th or the 6th, it's an important day for celebrating. 6th here, yeah. And there's different calendars and different times of the year when it's celebrated. But it's very special. And one of the things that's nice about it is it happens in the Kartik season. So it's a season that's already auspicious, and celebrating the Govardhana Puja day, or they in India they have a celebration they call Diwali or Deepawali. Deepa means lamp, or and I think it's celebrated there because they have it. It's a little different from what we're doing with lamps, but they lit lamps in that part of India when Ramchandra was returning from his exile. So because he returned at night and there was no electrical lights, they lit a lot of lights like this. Sometimes we're a little discouraged because we're a very small number of people compared to the world at large. And not long ago I was doing some research and with the search engines, and one of the search engines says that there's 1 million congregational members in ISKCON. I don't know, some people say that's much too small, some people say that's much too large, but that's what they say. And if you compare it to some of the biggest companies in the world, the ones that make weapons, the ones that make pharmaceuticals like Raytheon and Pfizer and all that, they usually, their number of employees is listed in the search engines as being between 1,000 and 2,000. 100,000 at the most. And so those people are different from devotee congregational members because they're getting paid for their work. They're exercising gainful employment. It's their livelihood. So it's different when there's congregational members that are convinced about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. It's a completely different thing because it's a philosophical conviction that they have. So it's very different from just getting paid. And as Prabhupada said, as soon as the payment stops, the relationship between master and servant is over. The servants just go away as soon as the payment is stopped. So that happens. And then another thing happened here, not here in this country, but in the Sunshine Coast a few days ago. A devotee who began in this Gurukul named Premanjali. Some of you know her. She's 22 years old. She was distributing books up there with a number of devotees who are up in the what's called the Sunshine Coast, which is quite a ways from here. I guess for those of you who don't know, it's about a 7-hour drive or more from this place. And she was distributing books, and there was a man about 20 to 25, maybe 30 years old, sitting on a bench. And she asked him if he would like a Bhagavad Gita, and he took the Bhagavad Gita and gave her a $50 donation. And then sometime later, she returned to the same spot, and the same man was sitting in the same chair, visibly moved. He was actually crying, and he had the book in his hand, and he was reading it. He was looking at the pages and reading it. And he gave her another donation of $100. So the total donations was $150. And he said, this is just exactly what I've been looking for. I mean, he was very moved. So this actually happened. It's not just a tale of fiction, but it's a real life incident that occurred a couple of days ago here in this country. So it's amazing what does happen There's sort of miraculous happenings, and we think of miracles to be people that can walk on water or fly in the air or cause people to do things that they don't want to do. But they're actually happening every day. And one other interesting story, I mentioned this the other day, was that I don't know where it happened, or I don't have any documentation to prove it, but this is the story that's going around. That Prabhupada was in a compartment in a train somewhere in India, and he was with his Western disciples who were shaved up, wearing saris and tilaks and so on. Pardon?
Shaved up with saris.
Sorry?
Sorry, you said shaved up with saris.
Yeah, the ladies were wearing saris, the men were shaved up, and there was a man from his part of the world who asked him. He said, "Well, he happened to be in the compartment along with the others. They were very small compartments, about maybe an eighth the size of this room. They're pretty small." And he said, "Well, you're a sadhu, so do something miraculous. Perform a miracle. Show us your multi-armed form, or levitate. Do something miraculous. Perform a miracle." And Prabhupada, according to this story, just looked down, didn't answer the man immediately, but kind of paused for a moment. Then he gestured to his Western disciples, the boys and girls, and he said, "This is my miracle." So it is kind of miraculous that people who were very committed in a way to a life of sin became sinless, and that's miraculous. And that goes on even now. So it's a very wonderful thing. And I don't know we have much time, but I want to read a section of a book that was written by Shivaram. It has to do with this Kartik season. The book is called Danadari Jana. This is the book, Danadaro Johnny. This is the cover of it. I can show it. And it, I don't know who translated it. It was written, I think, originally in Hungarian. I don't know what language it was in. But this is a little excerpt from that book. And what we don't have time to finish today, we'll finish probably the next time I give a class. But this is his story. It's called The Attempt to Bind Krishna. And the Damodar month is particularly important because it's a time when Yashoda, who was the foster mother of Krishna, tried to bind him up in ropes to stop his mischievous activities. And he was only a young boy of about 4 or 5 years old. So this is his rendition. And I'm not going to read it all, I won't have time. But he says, Yashoda Devi was intent on binding her son. Nevertheless, she could not feel compassion for him, and as always, she could not but be absorbed in thinking of him. Gazing at his human-like form, she thought, open quote, "How has the Creator fashioned such an excellent form, with limbs of unmatched softness, beauty, and sweetness?" Question mark, close quote. "Although he appeared to be crushed by a cart when he was a baby, by the grace of the Lord, my son was saved." Close quote. I don't know where the open quote is. "Now I will bind that same child with a rope. May Lord Narayan forgive me for any transgressions." Close quote. Treating him in a way that a mother treats an ordinary child, Yashoda set about binding Krishna. But she was no ordinary mother, and he was no ordinary child. He was Adhokshaja, the one who was beyond all sense perception. We analyzed this Sanskrit word Shokshaja once, and it means Shoksha is maybe it's the first or one of the first letters in the Sanskrit alphabet, and Ja is one of the last letters. So Shoksha, Ja means the one who doesn't exist in an ordinary way. The one who was beyond all sense perception, who by submitting to overwhelming influence of Yashoda's love, became further known as Avyakta, the one who concealed inconceivable powers to appear like a human being. And while Krishna would agree to subordinate himself to Yashoda, he would not do so without resistance. Did she think he could be so easily humiliated? Open quote, "Mother, do you think it is right that you should punish me like this?" Close quote. Open quote. If you were I mean, his English is weird. If you were someone else's son, I would not. But since you are my responsibility, I cannot neglect your education. If I do, then who will teach you the right from wrong? Close quote. Krishna had an answer for that argument. His more lenient father could educate him, and no doubt Nandaraj would not make such a fuss about a little spilt yogurt. Thinking better of voicing his thoughts, Krishna said, open quote, but does my mischief warrant such a severe punishment? Close quote. Open quote. Dear son, this morning you were more than mischievous. Close quote. Open quote. What was I? Close quote. Open quote. You were offensive, an aparadi. Close quote. Krishna was offended. Open quote. An offender? Close quote. Open quote. Yes, and so your punishment must be proportionate to your offense. Close quote. And so it was the time for Krishna to be tethered to the mortar. I think we'll have to stop now. Are there any comments or questions anyone wants to make? Yes? Go ahead.
It's just in relationship to the verse actually. I read yesterday in 6th canto, Prabhupada said that in a purport that when you come to the temple and you see the deity, you're actually being disinfected.
Thank you.
I thought that was quite relevant as we're talking about
Very nice. Yes?
They say that they say that time is conspicuous by its absence in the spiritual world. Can you explain that small comment, the last
Well, I don't know too much about the spiritual world, but I do know that a pastime, someone has said, is actually incorrect. It's called a misnomer. It doesn't really exist because there's no past, there's no present, and there's no future. Everything is always the same, present. So whatever Krishna enacts is going on somewhere in some universe at this, even now as we speak. But anyway, that's the difference between the material world. There's a beginning and an end to everything, and in the spiritual world, there's no end, there's no beginning.
When Yasoda said it's time to be tethered to the grinding order, just in that last quote by Shiva Armstrong, that the mention of time is there, but it doesn't exist.
Well, when Krishna plays the role of an ordinary person, he plays the role of a person who lives in a time-centered universe. So he plays the role of, his tears, he sometimes cries, and the tears are real. And then one might ask, well, how is that possible for God to actually cry? But they're real tears because he plays the role of a perfect son, and sons, young boys, they do that when they're chastised by their parents. So sometimes he's known as a great dancer. That's a sort of rough translation of a Hindi word that means actor, or like that. And he does everything perfectly. He plays that role perfectly, just like a good actor plays that role perfectly. He's so absorbed in the character that he becomes the character, even though he's not really the character. I think you know this story, but there was a time when Prabhupada was acting in a drama, and about maybe 10 years old or 12 years old, and all the students that were acting disliked the play director because he was so insistent on them doing things exactly in the way he wanted them done. They had to make certain faces, certain gestures. They had to speak in certain tones of voice. And they developed a sort of like, well, who is this guy? Why is he so strict? What's he doing? They developed an attitude, sort of a bad attitude towards him. And then when the day came, after they rehearsed I think it was for about 1 year, this drama, and reluctantly did everything the man asked him to do. He's a very well-known playwright. And Prabhupada played the role of a Dwight, I think it was a Dwight Acharya in that drama. And when the drama was being enacted live before the audience, they saw that people in the audience were actually weeping because they played the roles so well. The people thought they were the real, genuine article. That's a story that Prabhupada tells also. Speaking of stories, there are many nice stories that exist about how people came to Krishna consciousness or what happened after they came to Krishna consciousness. And some people are trying to preserve what was written in books by etching them, literally etching them in bronze or marble or some kind of stone. I think Mani Bandhe was saying that one of the religious sects spent millions of dollars etching the writings of their founder in stone so they would last for many years. And some of the work that's now being done by Hari Sori and Indradumna Maharaj, Hari Sori in Bengal and Sitala and others in Indradumna in Vrindavan, they're trying to preserve some of these ancient manuscripts. They're so delicate that even by just touching them gently, they'll crumble into dust. But now, with modern technology available, they can be etched into stone, they can be sprayed with certain chemicals, and there's a whole science behind it. They can be preserved for hundreds of years. So that's something that's going to happen. Even as we speak, some of the letters that Prabhupada wrote to people are being removed from public view because they're private.
Yes, you mentioned that in the last class.
Yeah. Yes.
Maharaj, you were talking about the Kartik, glories of Kartik earlier. Just so devotees try to do, extra devotional service and different austerities in Kartik, and also Chatumasha leading up to Kartik. Maybe chanting more rounds, reading, doing more service, fasting from sweets and things like that. Prabhupada talks about in the Chaitanya Charitamrita about the four items that we should fast from during Chatumasha: milk, yogurt, spinach and urdam. What's your understanding of the importance of following those things?
Well, one of my pet peeves, so to speak, is taking something out of Prabhupada's books and saying it's always true at all times, in all places. And that's exactly one of the things that he talks about. There's different vratas, different forms of austerity that are observed during Kartik. And there's abstention from milk, there's abstention from green vegetables, there's abstention from many things. But if we look at the overall writings of Prabhupada and his overall teachings, we can see that doesn't figure as a crucial element. It's not one of the must-dos at all times and all places. So I think it's a little intellectually dishonest to take something out of Prabhupada's books and say it's always true at all times and all places. As I was saying in the last lecture, realization is speaking making it interesting for the audience, making it doable. This is called realization. He said, I think it was Krishna Rupa that asked to have that verse read out to her. It was in the first canto, I think it's the 4th chapter, 1st verse. It's a purport. And Prabhupada said, to be really realized, you have to know what to say, to whom, and to when, in what place. So even though he did mention what the different austerities are in Kartik, it's not meant for everyone, all times, everywhere. Just like we don't stop drinking milk, most of us. I mean, some do and some don't. And there's also the restriction that men shouldn't shave. But they do it anyway, most of them. I mean, there are people that grow their hair very long. I'm not singling out anyone, but it's not that it's wrong. It's just that it's not emphasized as the most important thing to do. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment that the real big issue is not emphasised commonly throughout Prabhupada's work, and it's taken into a context of being such a thing. So that would stand with it for what you just said about that issue also and other issues.
I'm not sure what you're getting at.
That it's not emphasised, time, place and service, not continually propagated by Srila Prabhupada, these things.
Yeah, I mean, it was clear that sometimes initiations were enacted and Prabhupada wasn't present. Someone else took the role of the priest, and the people were duly initiated. They took first initiation. That's what Ritvik actually is, and what's going on. I mean, the so-called Ritvik movement is generally, as far as I know, has changed the name to the Reform movement because it's strictly not Ritvik, according to Sanskrit, from what I know. Sanskrit scholars have determined that. Anyways, we'll probably have to end now. Thank you anyway. Hare Krishna.